Your GM has shared this video with you because they care about you, okay? And they care about the game that you play together, and they want to take things to the next level. Often players seem to kind of hit a bit of a glass ceiling with their role play, but not you, not today, because we are going to expand your role at the table by looking at something that I consider crucial to the role play experience, and that is the process of reification. Hi, my name's Matt. Welcome to the Tomb of Lime. Alright, at some point you probably got your hands on one of these. Well, was it this one? Probably not. God forbid it was this one, right? Contrary to popular belief, this is not a role-playing game. And I don't mean that Dungeons & Dragons is not a role-playing game. I might mean that. But what I mean is, what's contained in this book is not a role-playing game. To borrow the language of video games, this is the code that the game runs on. It's not the game itself. When you buy a video game, you're not just buying a bunch of ones and zeros and like if-then decision trees. What the game designer really wants to sell you is the experience of playing the game. The code underpins the experience of playing the game, but before it gets to you, these ones and zeros are translated from just code into the game. They translate it into sights and sound and colors and meaning and things we understand intuitively. They translate it into the language of human experience. When a game's code leaks to the internet, they say the code has leaked to the internet, not the game. And that's because, it's not the game until it's got all the assets and it's put together and you can experience it. You can experience playing it. If you've got the code, but not the game, you can hardly be said to be playing the game. Why wouldn't that be the same with role-playing games? The rules, the mechanics, the stats on your character sheet, the results on the dice, these are not the game. They are the code for the game, and they are waiting to be translated into the game. And until that translation occurs, I think you can hardly be said to be playing the game, because it hasn't become reified. It hasn't become realized. It's unfinished. It's difficult to connect with on a human level and understand on a human level. And it's one of the reasons that playing that way in its untranslated form is unsatisfying and it's not engaging. But an RPG doesn't have a GPU and a sound blaster to translate the code. It has humans. It has players. It has you. It's up to you to translate the code that your character runs on. They're your character, so you have to realize them. I love talking about RPG mechanics, but I do not want to be doing that during the game, in the same way that I do not want to be seeing a video game's code while I'm playing the game. When someone asks how a game's mechanic works during a game, it's like bing, it's like an error message has popped up telling me that the game's code has failed to run properly. These messages might be important for when you're debugging and writing and coding a game or whatever, but talking about mechanics during a session is as much a part of playing an RPG as an error box is of playing a video game. Or like when the game slows down and crashes, that's that's the GM flicking through a book to try and find some table or whatever. Now, don't actually do this, right? You psychopath. But imagine during your session if you played that error sound whenever the code broke down, right? Whenever the code failed to run. I suppose it would give you a pretty good indication of how buggy your game is. We're never going to get all the bugs, right? But we should be trying to eliminate as many of them as possible. Take a leaf from my good friend, Mr. Needlemouse. In old Sonic games, if you somehow manage to get your character stuck in like the level's geometry, then it would eject you like at high speed out of the geometry in whatever the opposite direction of was the way you were pressing. Now, it doesn't make much sense, right, that would happen, but it does keep the game going. It stops it from crashing. In an RPG, if you're like unsure of how the code is meant to run, don't crash the game. Just move on. And then you can always look that stuff up at the end of a session and iron out all that stuff. But don't do it during a game. No crash, no error box, no slowdown. That's sort of covered what we shouldn't be doing, right? So let's have a look at how to translate that code. Every piece of code that you are privy to that's part of the game is begging to be translated. When you look at your character sheet and say, I've got 5 hit points left, right? Nothing has happened. From the code through you, out of your mouth, There's been no processing, okay? You have just regurgitated code. Instead of regurgitating, translate. Instead of saying, I've got 5 hit points left, it's the old storytelling, adage, show, don't tell, all right? So don't just tell us, show us in the language of human experience what that means. If the dice tell you you've lost 1 sanity, don't tell us, show us what that means. Realize your sanity loss through roleplay, because it isn't real. You haven't made it real until you do. This is not, as far as I'm concerned, a special act reserved for important moments of roleplay. It's like it is the content of the game. None of the code should get through you unchanged, unrealized and untranslated. Anyone can just regurgitate a piece of code, a number off of your character sheet, okay? But the reason that you are at your table, okay, as opposed to anybody else that could be there, is because how you translate code into the language of human experience is a function of human experience. And because your experience as a human being are unique, your translation will be as well. And your GM and the other players will look forward to how you realize your character, how you reify them, how you make them real, or real in the imaginary world. So next time you sit down to play, remember your role as translator. Every single piece of game code is not the game. Every single piece of code is a prompt for roleplay. It is not a replacement for it. Every stat on your character sheet, every roll of the dice. We don't want to see the code. We want to see the game. And doing this is going to help the other players at your table stay, immersed and engaged, because it's putting it in the language that we intuitively understand, that we can easily grasp and picture. So don't settle for an unrealized game in an unrealized world with unrealized characters, okay? Translate it all. Okay, if your GM did send you here, you can thank them in the comments, right? But I have a feeling that most of the people who do watch my videos are probably GMs, because, you guys are the nerds that are on YouTube looking at RPG game theory videos, right? So, hey, correct me if I'm wrong. I anticipate that not everyone is going to be on board with my video game code analogy. I'm sure it probably breaks down at some point, right? With heads-up displays or other non-diegetic elements or something. But, tell me all about it. Anyway, I hope that you guys have some great RPG sessions that are really well realized going forward, okay? But until next time, my name is Matt. This was the Tomb of Lime. Thank you very much for listening.